The day I first walked into the apartment building, I wasn't expecting much. Just a temporary place, a few months' rent, nothing more. Yet the moment I stepped into the lobby, I sensed the difference. The faint scent of lavender hanging in the air, mingling with the warmth of polished wood and the subtle musk of aged books lining the small shelves near the entrance. The sunlight spilling through the tall windows gave everything a soft, golden glow, making the space feel more like a home than a rental. And then I met her. She was standing behind the small reception desk, framed by the morning light. I remember noticing her first, the quiet confidence in her posture, the easy grace in the way she moved. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, yet it drew your eyes nonetheless. Her hair, a soft chestnut with hints of silver at the temples, fell naturally over her shoulders. The faint scent of her perfume, warm, slightly floral, comforting, lingered in the air even as I stepped closer. "Hello," she said, her voice warm but teasing, a subtle lilt that made you want to lean in just to hear more. Her eyes, sharp and observant, studied me for a moment, as if she were quietly assessing who I was, not in judgment, but with an almost playful curiosity. I introduced myself, fumbling slightly with the paper she handed me, and that was when it happened. Our first accidental touch. Her fingers brushed mine as she passed me the keys, a light, fleeting contact, but enough to send an unexpected flutter through my chest. I quickly glanced up to meet her eyes. She didn't pull away. Instead, she held my gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The rest of the walkthrough was equally mesmerizing. As she showed me around the apartment, I found myself noticing details I normally wouldn't. The way she leaned slightly against the doorway, the tilt of her head when she laughed softly at something I said, the quiet steadiness of her movements. All of it spoke of someone comfortable in her own skin, confident, yet with a subtle vulnerability beneath the surface. When she opened the windows to let in the morning breeze, I caught the faint shimmer of sunlight on her hair. The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer, charged in a way I hadn't expected. My mind kept returning to that brief touch of our hands, the unspoken connection that seemed to linger in the air between us. By the time I left the apartment that first day, keys in hand, I realized I wasn't just thinking about the space I'd rented. I was thinking about her, the landlady who had teased me with a smile, who moved with grace and authority, who somehow made the mundane act of handing over keys feel like an intimate gesture. The apartment had become more than a place to stay. It had become a place where something quietly electric was already beginning to stir. And I knew, even then, that this was the beginning of something I wasn't quite ready to name. A slow, teasing pull that neither of us could ignore. The first morning after moving in, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't even particularly like, just to prolong the moments before facing the day. She appeared quietly, almost from nowhere, carrying a tray with 2 cups, her presence filling the room without demanding it. "Thought you might need a proper cup to start the day," she said, placing the steaming mug in front of me. Her fingers brushed mine as she set it down, again, just a light, almost accidental touch, but it sent a ripple of warmth up my arm. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. We talked, at first, about ordinary things, the quirks of the old building, the strange rattle in the radiator, the best place nearby for groceries. Yet, with each sentence, each glance, there was something unspoken simmering between us. Her eyes would catch mine for a fraction too long, a flicker of amusement dancing there, as if she were sharing a private joke I hadn't quite been letting on. And I would catch myself holding her gaze longer than socially acceptable, fascinated by the calm confidence that contrasted with the teasing lightness in her tone. As she moved about the kitchen, I noticed the subtle grace in her gestures, the way she tilted her head when listening, the quiet rhythm of her movements as she poured cream into her coffee. The scent of vanilla from the creamer mixed with the faint lavender of her perfume, enveloping me in a warmth I wasn't ready to admit I was craving. At one point, she leaned slightly across the counter to point out something on the stove. Our knees brushed, accidental and fleeting, but the tiny contact made my chest tighten. She glanced down at the moment, a small smirk playing at her lips. Careful, she teased softly, or you'll owe me a lesson in spatial awareness. I laughed, though my voice felt a little too high, a little too eager. There was a tension there that neither of us named, but it hummed in the air like electricity. I felt an unfamiliar awareness of her proximity, how close she could be without breaking boundaries, how a simple touch or glance carried weight far beyond its surface. Even when the conversation drifted to mundane topics, I caught hints of her teasing nature. "Don't forget, your rent is due soon," she said lightly, and something in her tone suggested it was more than a reminder. My stomach flipped. I wasn't sure if it was nerves, attraction, or a dangerous mix of both. By the time she left the kitchen, the air seemed charged with unspoken words. I found myself replaying each gesture, each glance, each fleeting touch. It was intoxicating, subtle, frustrating, and exhilarating all at once. I realized that I was no longer simply the new tenant. I was a participant in a game whose rules were being written in smiles, light touches, and silent glances. That day, I walked through the apartment with a new awareness of her presence, of my own reactions, and of the tension that seemed to hum between us, delicate and persistent. And I knew, with a quiet certainty, that the slow unraveling of whatever this was had already begun. It was a rainy afternoon when it happened, the kind of rain that makes the city streets glisten and the air smell faintly of wet asphalt and old stone. I had just returned from running errands, juggling grocery bags, and an umbrella, when I slipped on the slick floor of the apartment's entryway. Time slowed for a brief, terrifying moment, the bags tilting dangerously, my hands flailing for something, anything, to grab. Her voice, calm yet laced with urgency, cut through the panic. "Careful," she called, and before I could even respond, she was there. Her hands steadied me, gripping my forearm gently but firmly, pulling me upright. The contact was fleeting yet electric, skin brushing skin, warmth radiating through my pulse. I felt my breath hitch, a surge of something unfamiliar threading through my nerves. I wasn't just relieved. I was acutely aware of her closeness, of the steadying weight of her presence beside me. "Thanks," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper, though my heart hammered loudly enough to betray me. Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, everything else vanished, the rain pattering against the window, the hum of the radiator, even the grocery bags at my feet. There was a softness there, a quiet amusement, but also something deeper, a subtle acknowledgement that this moment wasn't ordinary. "You really should watch your step," she said, her tone teasing, yet warm, brushing a stray damp strand of hair from her face. The movement was simple, almost unconscious, but the way her fingers grazed my cheek made my chest tighten. I had to look away, though I lingered just a fraction longer than necessary, catching the curve of her lips in a small, knowing smile. As I steadied the last of the bags, our hands brushed again, casual, accidental, but I felt it linger. That simple contact was enough to set my pulse racing, a mix of surprise, longing, and curiosity that I couldn't easily ignore. I realized that I was hyper-aware of every little detail, the faint scent of her perfume, the soft texture of her sweater, the calm steadiness in her posture that somehow made me feel both grounded and unsteady at once. We exchanged a few words, banal in content, but electric in delivery. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes holding mine just long enough to make me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. I found myself smiling, almost embarrassed at how my own body reacted. A quickening pulse, a flutter in my stomach, the awareness that being near her was quietly, dangerously intoxicating. By the time I finally set the last bag down, she had already turned to tend to her own tasks, leaving me standing there, mind buzzing. That brief, accidental intimacy, the brush of hands, the closeness, the shared laughter of my clumsiness, had awakened something I didn't know I could feel so strongly. Walking through the apartment afterward, I replayed it over and over. Each accidental touch, each brush of our hands, each pause filled with unsaid words felt deliberate in its impact. Something unspoken had shifted between us. The The slow burn had just taken its first significant spark, and I knew, with a quiet certainty, that the tension we'd been dancing around was about to become impossible to ignore. A few days after the close call, the air in the apartment seemed to hold a different kind of energy. Even the way she moved around the kitchen felt deliberately casual, as if she knew exactly how much to tease without giving anything away. I was sorting through my mail when I noticed a small folded note lying on the counter. My name was scrawled across it in her unmistakable handwriting, elegant yet playful. I unfolded it, and my eyes skimmed the words, "Your rent is due in kisses." For a moment, I thought I'd misread it. The air seemed to thicken around me, a pulse quickening. My gaze flicked toward her, expecting perhaps a smirk or a twinkle of amusement, and I wasn't disappointed. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed casually, her head tilted, eyes glinting with quiet mischief. "Don't tell me you're intimidated by the new payment terms," she said lightly, though her tone carried a teasing edge that sent a shiver down my spine. I chuckled, trying to play it cool, but my hands fidgeted unconsciously. I'll manage," I replied, words trailing off because I wasn't entirely sure whether I meant it literally or not. She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume mixing with the faint aroma of coffee in the air, and for the first time I noticed how close she could get without me realizing it, her presence enveloping me, her warmth radiating in ways that made it impossible to focus. Our fingers brushed as she handed me a pen to sign the acknowledgement slip for the rent, the contact electric yet subtle. I felt my stomach tighten, my pulse jumping in a rhythm I couldn't quite control. "Careful," she said softly, almost conspiratorially, "or you might find yourself paying a little extra." Her lips curved into a knowing smile, and the moment lingered just long enough for me to feel the pull, a magnetic attraction that was polite, teasing, yet undeniably charged. I cleared my throat, trying to regain composure. I think I can handle it," I said, though my voice betrayed a hint of hesitation, betraying the fact that I was already imagining what she meant by that note. She laughed softly, a warm, melodic sound that made my chest tighten. The sound was casual, almost careless, yet it carried an undercurrent of intimacy, a private joke shared between us. She leaned back against the counter, letting her fingers trail along the edge, and for a moment our eyes met and held, a silent conversation passing between us. The tease was more than words. It was the brush of her hand, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes softened and brightened at the same time. It was a promise without being explicit, a playful invitation that left me both thrilled and apprehensive. As I left the kitchen that day, the note tucked into my pocket, I felt the tension lingering in my chest. The playful challenge had awakened something deeper, a desire that wasn't just physical but emotional, a curiosity that pulled me toward her in ways I hadn't fully understood. The slow burn between us was accelerating, each glance, each brush of hands, each teasing word fanning the spark that was becoming impossible to ignore. And I knew, without question, that this game she had started, one I wasn't sure I could resist, had only just begun. It started as an ordinary evening. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle outside, and the apartment was quiet except for the occasional hum of the radiator. I had been sitting on the worn couch, absently thumbing through a book, when she entered carrying 2 mugs of tea. The scent of chamomile mingled with the faint trace of her perfume, creating a warmth that seemed to fill the room more than the steaming cups themselves. "Thought you might like something calming," she said, placing 1 mug beside me. Our fingers brushed again, lightly, almost accidentally, but the spark it sent through me was impossible to ignore. I felt my heart rate accelerate, my senses alert to every subtle movement she made. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of comfortable quiet that carries its own weight, until she shifted closer on the couch, her knee lightly touching mine. It was an innocent, almost casual gesture, yet it sent a rush of awareness through me. The press of her warmth, the softness of her sweater, the faint brush of her hair against my shoulder as she leaned slightly to reach for her mug. I didn't always live here, she said, her voice softer than usual. It caught me off guard, drawing my attention fully. She told me about her past apartment, about the neighborhood when it was quieter, about moments she'd shared with friends and family long gone. Her stories weren't dramatic, but there was a vulnerability in the way she spoke, a quiet openness that made me feel privileged just to listen. I realized I was telling her things too, small confessions about my life, my fears, the awkwardness of being 20-something and trying to navigate adulthood. Her gaze was unwavering, soft and understanding, yet tinged with amusement at my self-consciousness. When my words faltered, she reached out, lightly brushing a hand along mine, as if to reassure me without saying a word. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged with a new intimacy. Every glance, every accidental touch seemed amplified. The warmth of her hand against mine, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, even the soft clink of the teacups, made ordinary moments feel electric. At one point, our knees pressed together fully, and I felt a rush of something deeper, a combination of nervous anticipation and comfort. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled gently, her eyes reflecting both care and a teasing glimmer. "It's nice," she said softly, "to talk without having to pretend." That simple statement resonated more than I expected. In that moment, I realized that our connection wasn't just flirtation or curiosity. It was trust, built in small gestures, shared laughter, and quiet confidences. The slow-burn attraction between us had found a new dimension, one grounded not just in desire, but in understanding and emotional safety. As the evening wore on, the rain outside faded, leaving the apartment bathed in the soft glow of lamplight. Sitting there, shoulders almost touching, sipping tea, I felt an unspoken agreement forming between us, that this connection, fragile and new, was worth exploring step by deliberate step. And for the first time, I understood that the pull I felt toward her wasn't just temptation or curiosity. It was something deeper, an emotional gravity, slow building, irresistible, and entirely real. The evening was unusually quiet, the apartment bathed in the soft, golden glow of the setting sun filtering through the tall windows. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the streets outside glistening with reflections of streetlights and the occasional passing car. I was sitting near the window, absently flipping through a book, when she entered carrying a small tray with cookies and tea. "Thought you might need a little snack before dinner," she said, her voice gentle, but carrying that familiar teasing lilt that made my chest tighten. She placed the tray on the coffee table, and as she did, our hands brushed lightly. A spark shot through me, familiar yet thrilling each time it happened. We settled onto the couch, closer than usual, our knees almost touching. The warmth from her sweater radiated toward me, mingling with the faint scent of her perfume. A comforting, floral vanilla combination that made the air between us feel charged in a subtle, delicious way. Conversation flowed easily at first, but I noticed the pauses, the soft glances she cast my way, the small smiles that lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. At some point, the distance between us seemed to shrink without conscious intent. She leaned slightly to reach for a cookie, and our shoulders brushed. My heart stuttered in that sudden intimacy. She looked up at me then, her eyes catching the sunlight, and something unspoken passed between us, a quiet acknowledgement of the tension that had been building for weeks. "I like moments like this," she said softly, almost to herself. Her hand, almost unconsciously, brushed against mine again as if to punctuate the statement. The contact was electric, though delicate, and I found myself holding my breath. There was no rush, no urgency, just a slow, deliberate closeness that made my chest ache in anticipation. I could feel the subtle warmth of her arm as she shifted slightly closer. The room seemed to shrink around us, the hum of the radiator and the soft rustle of leaves outside forming a private soundtrack. Our eyes met, lingering, unblinking, each of us aware of the pull between us. And then it happened. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned forward, her lips brushing mine in the gentlest of touches. My heart leapt, chest tightening, a wave of warmth spreading through me. It was brief, a soft, hesitant kiss, yet packed with meaning, a culmination of weeks of stolen glances, lingering touches, and playful teases. When we pulled back, our foreheads nearly touching, we both laughed softly, a mixture of relief and exhilaration. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, a grounding gesture, and I felt a quiet thrill at the intimacy we had finally acknowledged. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, but also comfort and understanding. For the first time, the slow-burn tension had a tangible payoff. That small, delicate kiss was not just desire. It was trust, connection, and the beginning of something neither of us could deny. Sitting there, side by side, feeling her warmth and the steady beat of her heart, I realized this was more than a fleeting attraction. It was real, slow-burning, and utterly irresistible. By the time the week rolled around, the apartment had taken on a new feeling, less like a rental space and more like a place that held stories, laughter, and the quiet weight of shared moments. The air felt lighter, warmer, as though it had absorbed the subtle shifts in our connection, the slow-building intimacy between us. That evening, I found her in the kitchen again, tending to a small potted plant by the windowsill. The sunlight, soft and fading, caught her hair in a golden halo, and I couldn't help but pause, taking in the calm grace of her movements. She glanced up, smiled softly, and the simple gesture made my chest tighten in a familiar, pleasant ache. "Tea," she offered, holding out the steaming mug with that same teasing sparkle in her eyes. I accepted, and our fingers brushed, light, casual, yet lingering just a fraction too long. There was a quiet rhythm to these small interactions now, a comfort in the touch that had once been thrilling for its unpredictability. We settled on the couch, as we had countless evenings before, close enough for the warmth of her body to press softly against mine. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and small glances. Our hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining, a silent reassurance of the bond we had nurtured. "You know," she said softly, leaning her head on my shoulder, "I never expected my new tenant to become this." Her words were playful, yet her tone carried the weight of honesty. I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the warmth radiating through her body, and it grounded me in the reality of us. Real, mutual, and slowly unfolding. I shifted slightly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The gesture was tender, a quiet echo of all the teasing touches, the accidental brushes of hands, the notes and glances that had led to this moment. She looked up at me, eyes soft, lips curving in a gentle smile, and I realized that what had begun as flirtation and curiosity had blossomed into something richer, trust, affection, and a deep emotional intimacy. The playful game of rent and kisses had transformed into a rhythm of shared life. Evenings spent talking and laughing, mornings filled with quiet companionship and small touches that spoke louder than words ever could. Her hand rested in mine as I traced the curve of her fingers, and she leaned closer, brushing her cheek against mine. The warmth of her skin, the soft press of her lips against my temple, felt like home. For the first time, the slow-burn tension we had been nurturing resolved itself naturally. There were no dramatic declarations, no overwhelming gestures, only a gentle, steady acknowledgement of the affection and connection we had built together. We were present in the moment, letting the intimacy grow in small, meaningful ways, fully aware of how far we had come. As the evening waned, the apartment filled with a quiet serenity. Sitting there, side by side, hands entwined, I felt the truth of it. This was more than attraction, more than teasing. It was companionship, respect, and a love that had grown patiently, like sunlight filtering through an old window. And in that gentle warmth, I knew that this was only the beginning of a life together, quietly, deliberately, and beautifully ours.